And so in this video we're going to make a bouncing ball in Unity. It's not really the most exciting project in the world, but it is pretty much the first thing I ever made within the engine. And it does sort of kind of make you feel like a wizard, so it's probably a good place to start. And so the first thing we want to do is create a new project within Unity. So we open up Unity. Here's the project wizard, which I've set to actually launch as soon as Unity opens. That is not a default setting, but you can change it within the preferences menu. So we go to create a new project, just choose the folder where you want to save it, put it in there. We'll call this bouncing ball because I'm very creative. And we don't need any of the default packages, so leave all those unchecked and then go create new project. And there we have our project, so I'll just put that on the screen properly. And the first thing we want to do is we need something for this ball to bounce against, so we're going to do a floor, as in we're going to create a floor. So we go game object, create other, then we go plane, which is just basically a square, just a flat square. We can go down here in the hierarchy and rename it floor, just to keep it all organized and that kind of stuff. And then from there we have to create the ball itself. So we go to game object, create other, sphere. As you can see, that puts a sphere right in the middle of the plane, but we want to rename that first, make that ball, and then move that up, just however far you want to move it up, just doesn't really matter. You can change it in the inspect if you want something more specific, but just drag it up wherever, just so it's somewhat separated from the plane, or from the floor. As you can see down here, we also have the main camera. We just want to move this slightly up so we have a better view of our scene, as you can see down here in the preview. That's sort of the view that we want at the moment. And then from there we can just basically play that scene, see what it's looking like at the moment, go play, and that is what we've created. It is pretty much the most boring scene ever created within Unity, but we are making progress. And so the next step from here is we stop playing that, we select the ball, and what we need to do is basically make it so this ball is affected by gravity. To do that, we have to make it a rigid body, or at least we add the rigid body component to the sphere. And that might sound like a bunch of gibberish if you're not really experienced with Unity in any way, but just follow along, and it is fairly simple. You just go to Component, Physics, Rigid Body, and that's it. That sphere now has gravity applied to it. As you can see down here in the inspector with the ball inspected, it says use gravity and it's checked. So now when we go play for a second time, the ball just drops. Of course you can't really see it at the moment, so what we'll probably do is actually create a light. So create other, go spotlight, puts it right in the center, so we'll just drag that up. And now when we play, we can see the light there, and you can see where the ball lands, but it's not bouncing yet, it just drops and stays there, which is still pretty dull. And so what we want to do at this point is basically make it so it bounces. So once again, stop playing that, and what we need to do is select the ball, and we want to apply a physics material to it. So this is simply done by going to Assets, then we go to Create Physics Material. It creates it down here in the project, and what's called is bouncing, nice and simple. So we have this material here, and over here in the inspector you can see all these different properties. What we want to do is go to bounciness, we set it to 1, and I'll explain that in a moment, and then both friction combine and bounce combine to maximum. So set that like that. That material is created, it's saved, we drag it onto the ball, and now when we go to the ball you can see it applied here as the sphere collider, material bouncing, that's all good. And now when we go play, it goes down and then bounces right back up and then just keeps going over and over and over and over, and just until the end of time or until we hit the play button once again. But you may have noticed that bouncing was somewhat unrealistic because it keeps bouncing to the exact same height, and that is because of the setting we have on the material. Because at the moment the bounciness is set to 1. That means it's always going to go back to its point of origin. It's going to keep bouncing back up and then up, and it's not going to like diminish its bouncing at all. But if we change that setting to, let's say, 0.75, you'll see that effect change in that when you go play, it bounces slightly lower each time. Or specifically, it bounces 75% of its previous height. And while this in itself is a fairly simple example of what Unity can do, it did make me feel sort of cool when I figured out how to do this. It is sort of like a good starting project. It gives you an idea of how lights work, how cameras work, how rigid body works, how materials work. Like, it's pretty comprehensive. So even though we haven't really created anything interactive or a game in any sense, hopefully this is somewhat interesting, somewhat wetting your whistle for future Unity development. It definitely did that for me, and of course in future videos we'll talk about some more interesting stuff. But that I thought was sort of like a good place to start. because it's just what got me really interested in it in the first place. It's just like a really simple thing you can do that in other engines and other programming languages it'd be pretty difficult, but here we just did it completely via the interface with just a few button clicks, and that's pretty neat. Definitely subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Check out the blog for some other stuff as well. But that is it. That is our quick introduction to Unity. Expect more in the future. The end.